One of my all-time favorite things to do is to go on open houses and looky-loo at where the rich people live, especially the famous ones. Well, we have our own version here in San Francisco of the LA Star Tours, but instead of looking at exclusive Malibu Canyon homes, we have the grand Victorians of the 1800s. And since I feel like doing some house touring today, let's go hit some of the top, most famous Victorians here in San Francisco. Usually pictures of San Francisco neighborhoods depict tall, pastel-colored Victorian townhomes ranging up and down the hills with the kitschy cable cars thrown in there for good measure. Well, that's pretty accurate. Victorians were generally built between 1837 to 1901 during Queen Victoria of England's reign and include about 14 or 15 different architectural styles. If you recall SF history, there was a massive earthquake and subsequent fire in 1906 that destroyed the majority of the buildings, so what exists today are either rebuilds or revival copycats. The most famous set of Victorians are the painted ladies featured in the late 80s, early 90s sitcom Full House and 70 other TV shows, movies, and ads. They're also on a ton of postcards, thus aptly named Postcard Row. Located across the street from Alamo Square Park in Western Addition on Steiner Avenue, this is a must-stop on any Victorian houses tour. Keep in mind that they are private residences, so don't go barging up the steps to take your pictures, but do go across the street to the highest point in the park and get one with the great city view in the background. Clear on the other side of the park at the corner of Fulton and Scott is the Westerfeld House, which has a very long and colorful history, including being one of the first San Francisco hippie communes. It was built by William Westerfeld, a candy magnate, bought in the 30s by Tsarist Russians who turned it into a nightclub dubbed the Russian Embassy. In the early 60s, the Calliope Company hippie commune moved in, and in the late 60s, it was home to an independent filmmaker and an acid rock band. Yeah! The set of Full House actually composited several Victorians together to create the Tanner residence. And if you're inclined for a 20-minute walk down to Visadero, the front facade of the residence is located down the street in Lower Pack Heights on Broderick. It no longer has its signature bright red door, but it's still a sentimental favorite. The residence was owned by Full House producer Jeff Franklin until 2016 when he sold it for over $4 million. So look, but don't linger, as all of the neighbors are hypersensitive about all of the tourist traffic. Some of the most elaborate Victorians can be found in Pacific Heights. One of the most audacious is the Haas Lilienthal house, located on Franklin in Lower Pack Heights. This mansion was built by the Haas family and was their residence for over 80 years. The Haas family was very influential here in San Francisco. In addition to opening up a very successful grocery chain, they were also on the boards of hospitals, banks, and they even married into the Levi Strauss family and managed the Levi Strauss company for many generations. In fact, they were key to transforming San Francisco from a sleepy mining town into a commercial powerhouse. In 1972, the family donated the structure to the Heritage Foundation, who then opened it up as a museum. You could tour the house every Wednesdays and Sundays from noon to 3 p.m., and it's all dolled up with some of the Haas's original family heirlooms. The 26-room house was built in 1886 for $14,000. Yeah, that wouldn't even pay for a bathroom reno nowadays. Much of it has been upgraded to modern standards as the last occupant lived there until the 1970s. As you go up the stairs, there's a crack remaining from the 1906 earthquake, which William Haas refused to fix as a reminder. In fact, the house was like a block away from burning down after post-earthquake fires broke out. And the tour ends with an awesome vintage Lionel train set once owned by William's grandson, Billy Haas Lilienthal. In and around Pack Heights are two of the last three remaining San Francisco Octagon houses, named for their octagonal shapes, which back then people believed the rounder the better because it got more light, more air, and contributed to better health. Thousands of these were built all across the U.S. and very few remain. At the end of the commercial section of Union Street off Gough is the McElroy Octagon House, aka the Colonial Dames Octagon House, after the organization who runs this as a museum. The society bought it from the city for $1 back in 1952 and restored it at considerably greater cost, and now run it as an education center for colonial arts. It's an awesome place to go to look at some historical artifacts and also just to check out what an Octagon house really looks like from the inside. The house is open for tours on the second Sunday and Thursday and the last Thursday of each month. But you can't take pics inside, so let me go in and tell you what's up. In the meantime, here's some cool photos of the interior from the 60s. They're in black and white, but you get the idea. That was really fascinating. Great exhibits and great look inside the Octagon House, although they have restored it somewhat so it no longer looks the way it originally did. We're now just going to go up the street a bit to check out the other Octagon House. The second Octagon House is a private residence on Green Street called the Fuji Octagon House. It's actually in Russian Hill and not in Pack Heights. But whatever. It was built sometime in the 1850s and was purchased by Louis Feusier, who was married to Louise Gurn, whose father founded Gurnville up in Sonoma. If you go further into Upper Pack Heights at the corner of Broadway and Steiner, you'll see behind me here this stately Queen Anne Victorian, which was the setting for the 1993 movie classic Mrs. Doubtfire, starring the late Robin Williams as an out-of-work actor who cross-dresses as a housekeeper on the down low to get a job with his wife so he can be with his kids. Great movie. Totally recommend it. Since Williams' death, the sidewalk has become something of a shrine with fans leaving flowers and other mementos. The house was sold in 2016 and it's kind of fun to go through the real estate pics and compare it to the movie. See how much the house has changed. Hooked on Houses did a fantastic article on this that I'll link to in the description box below. And don't forget to look behind you to the fantastic view out to the bay. About 100 feet up Broadway from the Mrs. Doubtfire house is another Hollywood classic. This Victorian was a setting of the Salinger residence on the super popular 90s television show Party of Five. The house was sold in 2010 for $6.5 million, and according to the real estate pictures, it still pretty much looks the same inside as it did on the show. For our last two houses, we're headed to Haight Ashbury, the neighborhood that was central to the hippie culture. Just as free-spirited nowadays as it was back then. So it's not a surprise that the last two famous Victorians were residences of two of the greatest rock bands of that generation. On West Buena Vista Avenue, across from Buena Vista Park, is this beauty behind me here, which used to be the residence of Graham Nash of the legendary Crosby, Stills and Nash rock band from the 70s and 60s. As you can see, it's under construction right now, so a little bit difficult to see all the details. It's got a pretty rich history behind it. It was originally built in 1897 by Richard Spreckles of the Spreckles Sugar Fortune, and was home to Jack London when he wrote his novel White Fang. Then became the Buena Vista Studios, where the Steve Miller Band recorded demos. And in the 70s, it was purchased by Graham Nash. Up until a few years ago, actor Danny Glover lived here, and Graham Nash bought the house next door. You can take a quick detour and go up into Buena Vista Park to catch some of the spectacular views. But you're gonna have to earn it. There's lots of climbing. You can see the top of the Spreckles house below us, right there. 710 Ashbury is known as the Grateful Dead House, another legendary rock band from the 60s and the 70s. It was originally a boarding house that the band's manager souped for, and then he ended up setting up the band's offices there as well. Eventually, he cleared out the rest of the boarders, and the Grateful Dead took over the space, mostly as a work area, but periodically they'd sleep there. There are so many iconic pics of the band posed right on these steps. Across the street at 715 is where some of the Dead employees lived, as well as the album artists. It eventually became the headquarters of the local Hells Angels chapter. Ironically, the two most famous symbols of the countercultural revolution in the 60s and the 70s. And if you feel like retracing a bit of Deadhead history, you can end off your tour by taking a walk down Ashbury, making a left onto Haight, and strolling where the band used to go in between sets to take a break and mingle with the people. Okay, I'm done looky-looing for the day. My favorite pad was the Mrs. Doubtfire house. How about yours? Thanks for joining me today on this epic adventure, and until the next time, peace out.